first non-Indigenous settler, the father of Chicago, who we attribute to as our founder. His name is Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable, and he's of French and Haitian descent, and he set up a little fur trading establishment right here at the banks of the Chicago River in the late 1700s. Right where the Apple store is today, so how times have changed, right? We had a little fur trading establishment, and now it's an Apple store. But he was onto something. He thought, I think this little fur trading establishment, this marshy land and river, is going to grow. And was he correct? That fur trading establishment grew into a town, which grew into a city, which grew into the international city of Chicago. We're about to be getting our first few glimpses of right here, right now, on the main branch of the Chicago River. So eyes up and cameras up, folks, as we head down that main branch. We have things all over the city honoring Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable, so you can learn more about him. Specifically at the Michigan/Du Sable Avenue Bridge, there's a really nice bust of him. You can read more about it. There's going to be Du Sable Park coming up in Navy Pier, all different things to celebrate that first settler here in Chicago. Now let's get to talking about some of these buildings, right? That's what you came here for, and I can already see your eyes and cameras bouncing around to all these different wonderful buildings. And we're going to begin on the left-hand side with this rather tall, wavy-looking building. I like to call this building the Dr Seuss Buildings. It looks like it came out of a storybook. But it's officially known as the Saint Regis. It is in fact the third tallest building here in Chicago, and the tallest building in the world, designed by a female-led architectural group, Gang Studios. The head of that being the wonderful Jeannie Gang. We're going to be putting on our engineering hats rather quickly here today to understand how this building stays standing in the Windy City. Now, all these rather taller buildings you see surrounding us use different stabilization techniques to combat the wind. So we're going to check this one out. I want you to look 84 floors from the bottom and 17 floors from the top. What you're going to see up there is 2 open air floors. That's not a flaw of the building, it's a structural design known as the blow-through floors, and they do exactly what you would think. Instead of the building taking the brunt of the wind just blows right on through those 2 floors and stabilizes the building. So that's how this building stays standing in the Windy City. It's also one of our more expensive and newer residences along the river, only finished construction in 2020, and recently a top penthouse sold for $18.5 million. However, there's 361 units within that building, and they've only been able to sell 247 so far. So that speaks a little bit to the high-end real estate market not doing as well as they like. We'll be hearing different fun facts about the real estate market throughout this tour just because I think it's kind of interesting. But that Jeannie Gang, we're so proud of her. She's a Chicago local, a Harvard graduate, and a genius. Now that's not just my opinion. She in fact is a certified genius. In 2011, she won the MacArthur Genius Grant Award for her interdisciplinary style of architecture. She takes into effect the community, the individual, and the environment. So let's take a look at another one of her designs coming up on the left. And the second row, just behind this triangular-shaped building, you're going to see these light wavy panels on the front of it. Those in fact aren't panels, they're balconies. And each one of those balconies are geometrically unique. And there's 3 real purposes for that. The first being it creates what looks like an optical illusion of a wave cascading down the front face of the building. Thanks, Andre. He's always up there. Welcome to Chicago with his wonderful bubbles, bringing joy. We can give him a little wave back. Now back to that Jeannie Gang building. The 2 other reasons is because each one of those balconies are geometrically unique, it cuts the wind, allowing the residents to stay into their balconies into the colder months here in Chicago. And the third reason is for a community aspect. Right there in the top of your balconies, you can have a conversation with your upstairs and your downstairs neighbors. So tiny people having big conversations up there, that's Jeannie Gang. She recently just beat out all the other architects and will be leading the remodel of the O'Hare Airport in 2023. So we're really quite pumped about that. I recently read through the plans and they look phenomenal. She has a lot of great ideas to kind of re-energize the community around the O'Hare Airport, and also a lot of different themes of the Chicago's history into the architectural design itself. So we're really quite excited about that. Now we were just looking at 2 of our newer buildings here in Chicago, both residents, but we're about to take a step back all the way to the beginning of the 1920s to see where the evolution of architecture began here in the United States. So we're going to be looking in front of us on the right-hand side at this white building with the clock on top and that classic European style. That's the Wrigley Building. It was constructed in the early part of the 1920s in the Spanish Revival style. It's modeled after a cathedral in Seville, Spain, and uses 250,000 glazed terracotta tiles. Has to be hand washed because of those. It was originally constructed for William J. Wrigley Jr., who's the king of the chewing gum. You might have heard of Wrigley chewing gum before, right? Well, this was his first office space. Now we're coming up to that question out of curiosity again. Why? So why were they creating buildings in the classic European style in the United States? That's because the young US at the time had not yet developed their own architectural sense of beauty. So in fact, they were still borrowing from the Europeans. So any building you see here in Chicago, or really around the United States, it looks like it could be in Venice, Italy, or Paris, France, was most likely constructed in the early part of the 1920s, before they had yet to develop their own uniquely American style of architecture. Coming up is Trump International Hotel and Towers. This is the second tallest building here in Chicago, constructed in 2009 in the style of Contextualism. Contextualism is a style of architecture we'll be discussing a lot here today. So to better understand this style, we're going to be looking at these three patios or terrace or setbacks you see. Now they're no arbitrary height. In fact, they borrow heights from their neighboring buildings. So that first patio or setback right above the Trump sign, it's the same height as the Wrigley Building we were just discussing. The second patio or setback is the same height as this white rocket-shaped building across the river above the London House. And the third and the tallest terrace is the same height as that black box coming into our view now, but I know it's hard with the sun right now. That's contextualism, context-specific design. They're borrowing attributes from their neighboring buildings or environment. These buildings don't want to stand apart, they want to stand together. Coming up on the right is two buildings that need no introduction here in Chicago, as they're known as the twin corn on the cob buildings. I bet you can guess which ones I'm talking about, right? They look like two giant pieces of corn on the cob. Well, those are officially known as Marina City. They were built in the 1960s by a man named Bertrand Goldberg. He was a social scientist and an innovator for his time. In the 1960s, no one was living in the downtown district of Chicago. That's because they didn't have the infrastructure for it. So he had to do something about it. So he created a one-stop and shop utopian, a city vertically stacked on itself. Now what I mean by that is you can find everything you need to work, play, and live within these two buildings, and you never have to step foot outside. So you can park your car, head on over to your apartment. If you're hungry, go to the grocery store. Looking for a bite to eat, check out one of the restaurants. You spill on your shirt, no worries, there's a dry cleaners. While you're waiting for your dry clean, you check out a movie. Movie tickets are pretty pricey these days. Your office building's in here. Looking for some entertainment? Go to the bowling or the ice skating rink. This building has it all. Oh, and did I mention you can park a yacht underneath as well? We right now are floating next to the downtown district of Chicago on our left-hand side. And our public transportation will in fact take you on a loop of the neighborhood surrounding it. That's where it gets its nickname, the Loop, from. You've probably seen, and you definitely have heard, that our trains in fact are above ground. They're elevated. And that's where they get that nickname, the L, from. So you're gonna hear Chicago locals saying, hey, meet me at this stop, meet me at that stop. As we come under the bridge, you're gonna be looking on the left for a building with blue reflective glass in white granite. I want you to draw your eye all the way up to the top of this building. What you're going to see up there is an Athens Greek-style temple. It's modeled after the Parthenon. That's because the architect, Ricardo Bofill, one of the only international architects represented on the river from Spain, constructed this building in the neoclassic style. What that means is he took something classic like that Athens Greek-style temple, the Parthenon, kept the original proportions and dimensions, but then reimagined it with modern-day materials. That's where you get neoclassic from. Over here on the left, you're going to notice all these wonderful people. Maybe you saw some people having drinks, taking a nice stroll, or sitting along our river walk. The river walk was constructed in 2003 for the cost of $112 million. And it completely changed our relationship with the downtown district of Chicago. It made it not just a place for business, but also a place for a little bit of fun, entertainment, commerce. It also had the goal of bringing the citizens of Chicago down to the waterfront and hopes to increase our personal investment in this river's water quality. Here in Chicago, we are constantly working on that river water quality, trying to get it better and better. It's not great, but it's getting better. Coming up on the left, you're going to be looking for a building that almost looks like two buildings smushed together. That's because it practically is. The left half with the Greek columns on top was constructed in 1927. And 60 years later, he added on that smaller right annex in 1987. You're going to notice that newer, smaller right annex uses more modern day materials However, it's mimicking the style of the 1927 sign. That's because here in Chicago, we pay respect to the architectural history and heritage of our city, the things and places that came before. Another example of that is the Wells Street Bridge we're about to cross under. I want you to notice its old school charm. Look at the handrails, the lamps. You'll be surprised to know that this bridge was only constructed 9 years ago. However, it replaced the 91-year-old rustic bridge that stood here before. It's an exact replica. Another example of paying respect to the history of our city. Coming up on the right is the legendary, the wonderful, the marvelous, the large, the Merchandise Mart. If the Wrigley Building was the first style of architecture we discussed here in the United States, this is our second style, Art Deco, the style of the late 1920s. It uses polished Indiana limestone. The deepened windows creates a sense of verticality, drawing your eye upward. You're going to notice repetitive patterns and decorative metals. That's all the style of the late 1920s, the roaring 20s, a time of upward mobility for the upper middle classes here in the United States. And they wanted a style of architecture reflected the values of society at that time. Grandiose, sophisticated, luxurious, opulent. And that's exactly what Art Deco and the Merchandise Mart is. If you're curious what those heads on the post are, kind of look like giant Pez dispensers, those represent the wholesale buyers and sellers. So think of like the Jeff Bezos of the day. That's who those heads are representing. As we head into the Franklin Street Bridge, I've said it once and I'll say it again. Eyes up and cameras up as we head into Wolf Point for a 360-degree view of unbelievable architecture. It is really jaw-dropping, you guys. Right? Isn't that stunning? And we're going to begin on the left-hand side with this curved glass office building with the blue and the green glass. Might look pretty modern or contemporary to you, but it was actually constructed in 1983. And it's a beautiful example of contextualism. The curve in the glass represents the curve of the river. The blue and the green glass represent the river and the sky. Contextualism, that context-specific design. In this case, it's borrowing attributes from its environment to inform its style. This is also, famously, where Ferris Bueller's dad worked in the iconic Chicago film Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I bet you've already noticed this glass office building in front of us with the parabolic arches on the top and the bottom. This building's been nicknamed to be called the Hot Pocket, right? Because it kind of looks like a gigantic Hot Pocket, or maybe McDonald's apple pie box. Either way, it's gorgeous architecture and it's gonna make you a little bit hungry. We right now are floating through Wolf Point, which is the origin center of the town of Chicago. Don't think city, think town, 1830s, when all there was around us was a few taverns and a trading post. This is where it all began. It's also the conjunction of the three branches of the Chicago River. So we're just traveling down the main branch. We're gonna be heading up the north branch to check out some pretty cool stuff up here. And then later on, we'll be heading down the south branch. But I wanna draw your eye up the north branch to this peach brick colored building up here. This is the oldest building on the river. It was constructed in 1898. 100 years later, I was born to give this tour. Now this building up here, I want you to imagine it at the beginning of the 1900s without any windows or any balconies. That's because it was used as a giant ice box for the meatpacking industry. So what happened is they get beef from the south side, they store it in this giant ice box or freezer, then ship it all over the country. When the meatpacking industry went down, they had to reconvert this building. And when they cut through that 3-foot thick wall to create those windows and balconies you see today, what they in fact found inside the walls was matted horsehair and cork. That's what they were using at the time as insulation before they had things like styrofoam. Pretty wild, right? We're coming up to the Carroll Street Railroad Bridge. This is a landmark bridge, meaning it is not in use anymore. It's really only here for decor. It goes up and down about once a year for maintenance. But it's a wonderful example of how all the bridges here in Chicago work. So we're gonna need our engineering hats for this one. I wanna draw your eye to that large slab of concrete on the back there. That serves as a counterweight. And that's just how much weight you need to hold up that large steel frame. I want you to think of a teeter-totter or a seesaw. That counterweight pulls down and the steel frame goes up. And vice versa. The steel frame goes down and the counterweight goes up. This is how all the bridges here in Chicago are constructed. However, this counterweight is however, all the other counterweights are buried underground. So this one just gives us a nice visual representation of what's going on. Coming up on the left-hand side is a smaller slanted river cottage. You're gonna see some nautical themes going on, triangular windows, porthole sails. That's because the architect, Harry Weeks, was a sailor himself, and people thought he was crazy. Not for his funky design, but for creating residential housing on the north branch of the Chicago River in the 1970s. The smelly, the industrial side, nobody wanted to live over here. However, he was a man of forethought and proved them all wrong when that third leftmost cottage sold for $2.25 million. So today, people are paying the big bucks to live on the North Branch. But that wasn't always the case. We didn't always have the same relationship with this river. Another example of that is coming up on the right. This blue-green warehouse-looking building. This is East Bank Club. It's a high-end workout facility. And it's one of the only examples of a building not embracing the river. In fact, its back is turned on it. But that's what you did in the 1970s. They were treating this river like the dirty, stinky alleyway it was. But once again, times change, and over here on the left-hand side, these multi-million-dollar townhouses went up. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to make a giant U-turn. This is a wonderful opportunity to grab a drink for the bar, use the restroom, and I'll be floating around to see if you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns so far, and we'll jump back on mic shortly.
Rossa è la prima, è la casa più antica che c'è sul lago.
Sì, quella sì, però quella dopo.
Ah, ok.
Perché quando è stato costruito dicevano che fosse un parco.
Poi forse l'hanno lasciato un po' cattivo.
Sì.